You are hearing my voice right now without seeing my face, and that is how we are going to have these conversations, at least for now, as I experiment with strategies for getting these episodes to you more often. I'll have different types of videos on this channel that have my face in them. For example, I'll have a video coming out soon about how to use plant care as self-care, and those things are fun for me for documenting my life, but that is not what you're here for. What you're here for is the collective reimagining of our future as humans on this planet that is being hosted in this digital space. And today we are discussing another piece to that puzzle, another step toward that future, which is about collective healing, and even more specifically, why collective grief is necessary for that healing. Last episode, we discussed grief, what it is, why it visits us, and how we can use it to move through our sadness. If you haven't listened to that one yet, you're going to want to pause this conversation and listen to that one first so that you have the foundation for our talk today. Because today we are going to broaden our focus to a large scale. We are going to discuss the collective grief we are all feeling at this moment in time. First of all, let's talk about collective consciousness as an idea. What we are talking about here is our group experience of life, the thread of being that connects you to all other life. There are so many layers of connection between us all, and this is not even just a spiritual thing. I think we do miss very important things when we ignore the spiritual, but even outside of that realm, science is confirming the ways that we are all connected. Research in the fields of psychology, quantum physics, and neurobiology has been uncovering more and more of the mechanics through which we are all deeply and inextricably linked. I will leave a couple of the sources that I'm referring to down below, but while I was reading some of these journal articles, I decided that the topic of collective consciousness warrants its own podcast episode because it is so vast and there's so much compelling research out there. So we will talk more about collective consciousness a different time, but for our conversation today, let's just imagine accepting the idea of it. If we do accept this idea of collective consciousness, it becomes obvious that we are having a collective experience of grief at this time. It manifests as unexplained panic attacks, anxiety, a sense of dread or doom, fatigue, avoidance, chronic irritability, and immense sadness. And this is a natural response to the massive destruction of life that has taken place, especially over the last 50 years. Since 1970, we have lost more than 2/3 of the Earth's biodiversity. There is real, serious, deep grief in this, and none of us are unaffected. This is our home, and these are our relatives that we are destroying. We rely on them in ways we do not even understand. We are also having a collective response to the increasingly horrific acts of violence we have become aware of. The unbelievable violence and oppression we see impacting our fellow human beings cannot go unnoticed. The speed of information has increased exponentially between us all, and we are physically wired to be empathetic beings. We are built to live in communities and to feel something when a community member is hurting. But there are other natural processes that are interfering with this experience of collective pain. These processes are intended to protect us from deep psychological harm. When something is so painful and there is no end in sight, it just keeps going, the natural human response is to shut down or dissociate. And we are living in a time of collective dissociation in response to the sheer volume of violence, pain, and loss we have experienced. This dissociation can be recognized in overconsumption, excessive screen time, and an obsession with money, among other indicators. These things provide such a sense of distraction that it can numb the pain of feeling this collective grief. We see examples every day of the significant costs of bypassing grief and living in dissociation. When big companies make decisions that violate the rights of all living things, poisoning waterways, polluting land, destroying homes, there are real human beings behind each of these decisions. In order to make a deliberately damaging choice for profit, for a game that you know in your bones is not real, you have to be in a serious state of dissociation. Just like on a personal level, grief is an important part of the healing process collectively. It allows our shared pain to be transformed into something new and better, especially in the case of our treatment of one another and our natural world. We need to feel that grief about what has been done so we can heal and move forward. We need to grieve the children who have been separated from their families, the children who have been beaten for speaking their own language in this country, the horrific acts of violence that have happened here, the cruelty our grandparents experienced and then replicated in our family lines. Whatever comes to your mind, it may be your role to grieve that thing in particular in your own unique way. So, how do we collectively grieve? First, we need to be present with ourselves. We spoke last episode about the difference between grief and despair, and we want to protect ourselves from falling into the depths of despair, which means that we need to take each moment as it is at a time. Something might come to you to grieve, and this is just my first caution to be conscious of thinking of that thing and then connecting it to another thing and sort of going down a spiral. And one of the best ways to stay conscious of this is to stay really mindful. If we are at a point where we can no longer see the good in the world, then we've gone too far. Being in a state of collective despair is paralyzing, and it's something that we see playing out before our eyes with all of the horrific headlines and sound bites that we're bombarded with. It naturally leads back to that state of dissociation or else complete incapacitation. You've probably heard me say it before, and I'll say it again. We are not wired to be able to handle all of the horror that we are aware of in today's age of information. Second, if you have the opportunity, actually experiencing grief with others in an intentional way can be very powerful. I recently had such a cool chance to participate in a grief letting ceremony led by sound healer and grief doula Gina Breedlove. Gina is the author of The Vibration of Grace, Sound Healing Rituals for Liberation, which I've recently begun listening to on Audible. So maybe we can talk about that book in the future once I've finished listening to it. During this experience, we worked in a group setting to move grief through our bodies and into the earth so that the earth could absorb and recycle that intense energy. I do personally believe that the earth absorbs energy from us that is harming us. If you got a chance to listen to episode 8, The Surprising Health Benefits of Grounding, you know that there is a whole lot of science about the electromagnetic field and the effect it has on humans, specifically the slightly negative electric charge that the earth has. So that's not something I'm an expert on by any means. I barely even know what it all means, but for me, the bigger point is that we are constantly finding out more that the earth is doing for us on a biological and even atomic level. So I have no reason not to trust my lived experience of feeling this effect. All to say, if you have the opportunity to be sort of formally guided through a group grief letting ceremony by an experienced leader, I highly recommend it. Now, of course, that may not be an option, and if that is not something you have accessible, I also think there's great value in just talking about it, maybe in smaller circles. Speaking with your loved ones, your friends, and community members about things that feel heavy on your heart is a great way to begin to allow some air to get to the wound so it can heal. I always recommend the guidance of a mental health professional or trusted healer if that is something that is available to you and if it feels like it's too much to handle on your own. As therapists, it is our job to create that holding space for you to be able to experience intense emotions within the supportive structure that we provide. But having these conversations with friends, family, and community members is also important as we reconnect with one another, which is part of why we are talking about these things here in this podcast. And I want to honor here the fact that there are so many barriers to accessing therapy. So, community support may be the only option for many. If this is the case for you, you may need to move more slowly through your grief and use more grounding tools along the way to protect yourself from becoming overwhelmed. Third is having a personal experience of collective grief. It is powerful to spend a little bit of time connecting to the earth and allowing a tolerable amount of collective grief to come through your body and into the earth, trusting the earth to recycle that energy. You can find a quiet space where you have direct contact with the earth, whether that is on the sand of a beach, a rocky shore, sitting in the grass, or under a tree, whatever natural environment you have access to. And just allow your mind to flow wherever it goes with the focus of releasing collective grief. Something different might come to mind each time you do this, and you just allow the emotions of pain from the collective experiences to flow through you and into the earth. I know this might sound a little out there to some, and that's fine, but I really believe this has an effect. And if that resonates with you at all, it's really something to try. Fourth, let your actions on the outside match your feelings of despair, outrage, and grief by allowing your behavior to be changed by these feelings. Of course, I am talking about in a healthy way, and as I've been saying, only the amount that is tolerable for you. If you are slipping outside of your window of tolerance and your ability to function, then that is a problem. But I'm saying get involved in your local communities, and God bless you if you have it in you to get involved in your local politics. Please do. Always checking in with yourself whether your personal politics are on the side of life and love or fear and division. Advocate for causes you feel strongly about. Support nonprofits you trust that are working to undo the harm that has been caused by the things that you are grieving, because they are usually out there, and if they aren't, maybe consider what it would take to make one. You can also volunteer for things, participate in demonstrations, and get involved in other ways like this. This is how we actually allow our grief to be released and transformed into alternate action for a different future. And that is why collective grief is so important to collective healing. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast episode. Please give it a like if you did and subscribe. And if you listened to the whole thing, I am so grateful and I hope you got something out of it. Thanks for listening, and I'll meet you here next time on Reimagining Ourselves.